Hello there and welcome to the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. I'm your host, Vidas Pinkevičius. Welcome to Secrets of Organ Playing podcast number 118. This is Sunday, October 29, 2017, and today's guest is an American organist, Angela Kraft Cross. And she is visiting Vilnius with the San Francisco choir, right? And we will talk about her practice experiences, about the challenges, about all those things that we both love and enjoy. So let's welcome to the show Angela, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Vidas, for having us. We are here on this trip because of the Viva la Musica choir coming from the peninsula just south of San Francisco. And we are doing a tour of the Baltic states, and we are so happy to be here.
Wonderful. I just showed the organ for you yesterday, right? And you had this rainy afternoon yesterday in Vilnius. How do you like Vilnius so far?
Actually, we love Vilnius. We love Old Town, and we especially love this instrument. You have such a wonderful organ here.
You spent a few hours right here.
We did.
And what did you play yesterday here? Besides Bach, G major prelude and fugue.
I worked on the Bach prelude and fugue in G major. I worked on some Brahms, the Herzlich tut mich erfreuen, and Schmücke dich, and the Prelude and Fugue in G minor.
Yes. And
also worked on the finale from Mendelssohn's Sonata 1.
Yeah, Mendelssohn and Brahms are your very favorites, right? Because you have recorded a couple of CDs. One CD is with almost entire organ works by Felix Mendelssohn, and another CD is from Buxtehude to Brahms, right? The entire Germanic tradition.
One thing that's fascinating about that to me is that one of the things I learned along the line was that we think of the early German Romantic composers such as Mendelssohn and Brahms and Schumann as being in a totally, it's like when you study music history, there's like the Baroque period and then there's the Romantic period, and it's almost like there's this clean-cut division between them. But actually, music history is a long continuum, and it's very interesting to me that the early Romantic composers, especially the Germanic ones, inherited the organs that the German Baroque composers, like especially, Buxtehude, Bach, they were writing for the very same instruments. So it's fascinating to me that you can have a continuum, and I recorded the 200 years in the Germanic tradition to show that on a Germanic instrument that you can play all the way from Buxtehude and Böhm all the way through until Brahms, and it all fits very, very nicely.
Wonderful, Angela. What instruments did you choose to record those CDs on?
Well, the 200 years in the Germanic tradition, Buxtehude to Brahms, I did that on the von Beckerath organ at Église Américaine, or the American Church in Paris. And that is not exactly a historic instrument, but it is a German tracker action organ that's it's sort of conceived in the Baroque tradition. My Mendelssohn album is a 2 CD set, and it is recorded on the historic 1801 George England organ that's in London. It's right behind the Bank of England. It's a church called St. Margaret's Lothbury. And the cool thing about this instrument is that it's a part of the church's oral tradition that Mendelssohn came and visited that organ and played on it. He didn't perform on it, but he played on that organ. His friend Samuel Wesley, brought him to to that organ. Now, that organ has had a number of changes back and forth over time, but it has been restored in its original condition.
That's what I was thinking, because Mendelssohn has a lot of English connection. And if I remember correctly, when he visited England at one point, he advised to expand, I think, pedal boards, right? Because he wanted to play organ works of Bach too. So I think later on, English organ developed more extensive pedal board suitable for all kinds of organ music.
It's interesting because I have a very dear friend who's a British organist, Jonathan Melling, and Jonathan said something to me once that totally took me by surprise. He said, I always thought that Mendelssohn was a British organist. And in America, we always think of Mendelssohn as definitely being German, and most of Mendelssohn's career obviously was in Leipzig. It was the same town that Bach ended up in. It turns out that in Mendelssohn's lifetime, he gave a total of one organ recital in Germany, which was at St. Thomas Kirche in Leipzig, where Bach was. But he gave many, many, many organ recitals in the British Isles. He even played for Queen Victoria, and he was like a rock star on the organ in Britain. So Jonathan's right. He was a British organist. And the other interesting thing is if you look at Mendelssohn's organ scores, anytime the pedal becomes the least bit virtuosic, the left hand drops out. And that's because during the early 1800s, organs in England were not dependable to have a good pedal board. And he never knew for any given organ whether it would have a workable pedal board, a good pedal board, let alone one that could handle the virtuoso passages that he would like it to have. So he always made it so in his work so that if he needed to, he could substitute the left hand for the pedal. And I find that's very interesting. You look all the way through his book, and every time the pedal gets the least bit rambunctious, the left hand drops out totally.
I see. So left hand and pedal coordination was still an issue.
Yeah.
Like for today's organist, a lot of people cannot really play left hand and pedals at the same time different melodies because they're so used to playing piano music, right? And then when they start to play the organ, and left hand becomes not the lowest stave, but the middle stave, and that's complicated.
I always say that that's one of the biggest adjustments you have to make when you're moving from like either harpsichord or piano to organ, is that you have to learn how to incorporate your feet as well. And it's almost like when you think about playing the piano, it's like you have two halves of your brain, and you have one side that I am right hand, I am treble, I am left hand, I am bass. And when you then switch to organ, all of a sudden the left hand is no longer the bass, and then you have two more limbs. You have a right foot and a left foot that have to get involved. And it's interesting to me as a teacher as well that I find that if young people can start organ when they are 10, 11, 12, 13, it is so much easier for them to incorporate their feet into the entire picture, and they are very fast learners. And people that come to organ as adults, sometimes it's a bigger struggle to get the feet to incorporate. And I think that the young mind is more flexible and is able to incorporate it more easily.
I think you're right, and with age we do gain some different things, right? Our mentality advances with age. We can process information perhaps on a more deeper level than teenagers, for example. So, and our motivation might be better than teenagers, right? We can practice with more focused mind and longer periods of time, and without any sort of gratification feeling, instant gratification that teenagers normally wish for.
Yeah, more stick-to-itiveness.
Of course, we also want to succeed and play well, but we can wait until this result shows up a few months later, right?
I think that's true.
Excellent. So, Angela, you mentioned your interest into Germanic tradition. When did it all started? Can you go back in time? Maybe let's talk about the first experience with the organ. How did you first fall in love with this instrument?
You know, it's interesting. I think it was just very, very good luck, serendipity. My very first piano teacher was a man named S. Leslie Grow, and he actually was the organist at the church that I'm now the organist at, the Congregational Church of San Mateo. But I didn't know that when I was 7 years old and studying piano with him. And the first 3 years of piano went very well. And he came to my parents and said, "Do you think Angela would like to study the organ too?" And so, you know, you're 10 years old and your parents say, "Do you want to study the organ?" And you say, "Sure."
Why not?
Sure, sounds like fun to me. And it's interesting, the first year or two of organ, there's an awkward time where it's just hard to put it all together, but somehow you just know that it's going to be fun when it's finished, and so I studied organ all the way through high school, and I gave several recitals when I was in high school and went through a lot of wonderful organ literature. I was very fortunate because Mr. Grow had been a scholarship student of Marcel Dupré in France, and he had a tremendous love for French Romantic, and it was very contagious, and I caught that bug very early and fell in love with the French Romantic period. But I also love Bach, too, and I love Mendelssohn, and I love all those composers. And it's interesting because I then did my organ in college. I was an organ major at Oberlin College, and they have had a wonderful organ program for many, many years. And I learned a lot about tracker action instruments and historical perspective and playing authentically. And after that, my whole life took another turn, and I ended up going to medical school and becoming an ophthalmologist, eye surgeon. And it was actually during those years that I got my master's in piano. But after I finished my master's in piano, I was yearning to do more education, and there wasn't an obvious way for an eye surgeon who's working close to full time to be able to do a doctorate in America because there are just so many hours in the day. And I knew that I wanted to study overseas, and I won't go into the long story, but I was able to find Louis Robilliard in Lyon, France. And I had heard him play when I was at Oberlin, and I was absolutely it was a breathtaking performance. I had never heard an organ sound like that before. And we tracked him down in Lyon, France in summer of 1994, and I went up and talked to him and said, "Would you ever take a short-term American student?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "Oui." And I was just so surprised. And so in January of 1996, Robert and I spent a whole month in Lyon, France, studying intensively there, practicing 5 hours a day and taking 4 to 5 90-minute lessons a week. And it was a very intensive time, and it was amazing. I kept telling Louis Robilliard, I feel like I've died and gone to heaven, because American organs are nice. I love them very much. But between the acoustics and playing on an authentic Cavaillé-Coll instrument and playing the music that I had fallen in love with many years earlier, it was like a match made in heaven, and it was just an amazing experience. So after that, I came back every 2 years and tried to do little study trips with Monsieur Robilliard, and he's like my organ father now. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to him.
Wonderful. So it's a long story, right? And Robert, your husband, is also sitting next to us, but patiently waiting for his turn, because he will be turning pages and assisting pulling the stops tonight, right, at this concert for you. And he also records your performances and makes them into CDs, right?
Yes.
So wonderful, basically a tandem, right, team of talent and skill to put everything together and to further the organ art and share it with the world.
Yes.
So, Robert, what type of organ music do you like?
Oh, like music. That's like, which kind of art do you like? It's Angela picks projects to do, like a Bach project or Mendelssohn project. Also French. She's learned to specialize in a lot of French. And our last CD that I recorded with her was on the Cavaille organ in Lyon at Vidor's organ. It was Vidor's father, the famous Vidor, and his father actually started Vidor. He was born in Lyon there, and we had an opportunity to record. We recorded a 2 CD set of a few of his symphonies, later symphonies, and it was wonderful to actually feel the sense of putting together Vidor as Vidor would have heard it, because he grew up on that organ, then he went to Paris. But he one of the pieces that we did, of course, was the 5th Symphony. And when you listen to the 5th Symphony on the organ, you know, that Vidor, Charles-Marie Vidor, actually got to premiere at his father's organ in Lyon. It was a wonderful feeling that you are in history. So recording things like that, it was a joy. It was wonderful. So just being with Angela and watching her grow and be excited about what she does makes me excited. And, you know, I think the audiences that listen to the CDs also feel that, and we get a lot of good comments. So.
Wonderful, Robert. Do you play the organ yourself too?
No. I teach art and art history, but and aesthetics, but I don't play the instrument. I played piano when I was very young, but I never did what Angela did.
But you could, right? You could study for fun, for your, like a hobby, because nowadays what I experience is that a lot of people, for example, when they retire, they have more free time, and they want to pick up their hobby from the early days, or the instrument from the early days, which they didn't have time for decades, when they were active in another field like ophthalmology, right, or something else, or law, or engineering, or physics. So I have a lot of students like that from all over the world, especially from America, because people understand that when you retire, you have to find something to do with your free time, right, and something useful. Do you remember, Angela, when you first started playing the organ, what was the first piece that you tried to play on this instrument? The first organ composition, or was it a hymn maybe, or a piano arrangement, or something like that?
I remember the first time I actually tried to play the organ at all. It was MacDowell's To a Wild Rose. But in the actual organ literature, I started with the 8 little preludes and fugues of Bach.
Oh, good. We all start.
Well, that's what I start when I teach too.
Mm-hmm. It's a good collection, right? Very systematic and methodical.
Well, the funny thing is, there's always been a question of whether Bach really wrote those or not, and it's interesting because they're not as Baroque; they're actually more classical era, the way they're put together.
So maybe a student of Bach, like Krebs.
Yeah, I think that's what's.
Some people agree about Johann Ludwig Krebs's authorship. But at any rate, it's Bach school, right? Basically, the Bach circle. It was influenced.
And then Purcell trumpet voluntaries, those were early on.
Yeah. What was challenging for you then? Putting everything together, or playing pedals maybe?
You
Or
know, it's funny.
articulation?
I always look back on really early organ as it goes through an awkward phase. There's a point where, for starters, you don't have your full adult height yet, so you're sitting on the bench, and you have your neck craned way up, and you're looking at the music on the music rack, and then you lower your head and you look at where your hands are, and then you look way down at your feet, and then you crane your neck way back up again. And it seemed like an endless process, trying to keep track of where the music was, where your hands were, where your feet are.
Very interesting perspective. I also sometimes struggled with this at first, but then later, somebody told me to sit further and look at the bigger picture, like to see entire page maybe, and to see with peripheral vision, and then maybe you orient yourself better on the keyboards and pedals as well. I try not to look at the feet when playing, and try to advise students not to look as well. But it's sometimes unavoidable, especially on unfamiliar instruments, or when you improvise sometimes, when you want to make up melodies that didn't exist before. And sometimes you improvise unexpected passages. You expect to go right, and your feet goes down, left. And then you have to look. Sometimes you hit the wrong note, and sometimes this wrong note becomes the right note because it catapults you to the
into a different chord.
Yeah. So, Angela, you overcame these challenges, right? What was the process for you to master those intricate 3, 4, or even 5 parts of organ playing?
I think one thing that back in those years, reading music was a painful process. I really didn't like reading music. And so as soon as I could decode the thing and figure out what it was, I memorized it. And then it was so much easier. And then I didn't have to look up anymore. And it was much more comfortable playing from memory. And it's interesting because I have a few students right now who are doing the same thing, that the sooner they can get things memorized, the sooner they get airborne, and it works.
Yeah, I noticed you played from memory this wonderful 541 G major prelude and fugue by Bach, almost without any hiccups and any adjustments.
Well, I learned that when I was in high school, so I was a teenager. So it's an old friend, that one.
Old friend, yeah. You keep it fresh from time to time. You repeat it.
They hear it in church periodically, yeah.
She has a few that she can pull off like that.
What are some of your favorites that you could, come back over and over again?
Well, in Bach, I love the Prelude and Fugue in G major and the Fantasy and Fugue in G minor. I love the Wedge Prelude and Fugue.
That's a tricky piece.
I also love the Passacaglia Fugue in C minor. I have so many Bach pieces that I love. And Mendelssohn, I have several sonatas that I especially love, and that was sort of what helped me decide to learn, the rest of that book to put together a CD. But I love the sonatas 1, 3, 4, and 6 for starters.
Do you usually practice at home or at church? What do you
My
practice?
favorite place to practice is at church. And there's a second church where I also teach that has a tracker action instrument, and I enjoy practicing there as well. It's only 12 minutes from home, so it's...
Do you have an instrument at home too?
I have a small electronic instrument.
Does Robert enjoy the sounds of the electronic instrument at home?
It's not so much the electronic instrument, of course, is not like your wonderful organ here. It's electronic. But what I have learned to listen to is the way Angela will actually, it's a joy to actually listen to her practice. She'll pick up a brand new piece, and even on the first hour that she's with a brand new piece, it's not painful to listen to. She doesn't do one measure at a time. She doesn't learn it that way. She plays it as a bigger thought, a bigger piece. And so listening to her, no matter what organ it's on, and she will actually play concerts on electronic organs. If a church invites her and they have an electronic organ, she will do it, because what she feels is the bigger picture. This church, or wherever she's going, that's their organ. They like their organ, and she says, I will make it sound the best I can, no matter how it's made, how small it is, how big it is. Mm-hmm. And so she's learned to do that. So that's what I listen for.
And usually, even in the most instruments, you can find at least one decent stop, usually 4-foot flute, which could sound very well, and you could play on it for hours. Especially on pipe organs.
Well, I always think that organs are like human beings. Most of them have strong points, weak points. Some of them have more challenges than others. But it's always our job as organists to bring out the best in every organ that we play. And if you figure out that there are things that don't work as well, then you tend to not use those combinations as much, and you tend to try to make the organ sound the absolute best you can.
Mm-hmm. Do you have your favorite organ stop combination, for example, that you use on a lot of instruments, if you find them? Or you try to register your pieces in different way every time?
I think that a lot depends on what we're talking about. Like if we're doing Bach, we're going to be looking for a nice principal chorus sound. If we're doing French Romantic, there's a certain, French Romantic sound where you have the reeds on the swell and they're coupled down to the positif and to the grand orgue. And you can use the box to make the reeds more prominent or less prominent. And so it's according to what part of history and what country we're working with. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if you're playing on an organ that perhaps is more Germanic Baroque and you're trying to play French Romantic music on it, that's more of a challenge. But I think what you have is you have in your mind what it would sound like on the Cavaillé organ, and you do the best you can to pick stops that would emulate that. Mm-hmm. And like, for instance, it's possible that, if you're, playing the Vidor toccata or something like that, that, maybe you would have many, many mixtures on a Germanic organ that are available to you. But if it sounds too bright to you, then you leave those off.
There is the trick that sometimes people do with Germanic or neo-Baroque organs built in the Germanic tradition when they want to play French music, symphonic music, romantic music, and not so bright sounds. So then they perhaps play one octave lower, if it's possible to adjust the tenor range. So the left hand has to not go lower than the tenor C. And an octave lower would be the bass C, the lowest note on the keyboard. So, of course, we don't use then 16-foot in the manuals, but then playing one octave lower would make it sound like with 16 feet, plus the mixtures also would be one octave lower and not so bright. So that's the trick with a lot of French toccatas. You can play one octave lower, like Vidor too, Vidor toccata, even on a neo-Baroque instrument, quite satisfactory.
Yeah, I hadn't used that trick, but I do tend to pick out, pull on the 16-foot, avoid the mixtures, and even on the swell, if the 4-foot reed is too bright, I will leave that off.
Me too, yeah. Sometimes those are very, very. It depends on the voice, on the reeds.
Exactly.
Of course, you have to listen and listen for the end result and compare it with the ideal French sound that you have in your memory from the Lyon times.
That's right.
Wonderful. So, what is challenging to you now, Angela? We talked about your early days. You didn't mention who was your organ professor at Oberlin.
I had two different organ professors. I started with Garth Peacock, And then I ended up with Bill Porter.
Oh, wonderful organ master and fantastic improviser.
Yes, and he was especially wonderful with the Baroque music.
Mm-hmm. He went on to teach at New England Conservatory later on, and then I think at
McGill also.
Eastman School of Music, and later McGill University too. Fantastic person.
Yeah, he has had a fantastic career. Wonderful teacher.
Yeah, especially if you are dealing with early music. He knows so many things and how to make it alive and how to create it from scratch, how to improvise and to make it stylistically coherent and convincing. It sometimes it seems like Buxtehude or Svelling was resurrected in his playing. You know? Oh, is it this Svelling newly rediscovered piece by Svelling, or Buxtehude? What Bux WV number is this? You know? No, it's just improvisation.
Yeah.
So these masters can do that.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. So Angela, what's your next project? What are you currently working on?
Well, I'm sort of between projects right now, having just finished the Vidor project where I recorded symphonies 4, 5, 6, and 7. And for that particular project, I had played symphonies 5 and 6 for many, many years, like since I was in my teenage. And Symphony 4 I had learned a couple of years before because I had a student who suddenly learned it. He's a young genius named Ethan Heyman. He's down at USC now. And so I needed to learn that piece so that I could more fully teach it to him. And I needed to be able to fill out the double CD using yet one more. And I sort of studied the other symphonies and decided to go with 7. And I expected that to be sort of like a continuation of 5 and 6, and I was so surprised that it was so much more mature, and that was just a wonderful project learning that. And so I recorded 4, 5, 6, and 7 at San Francois de Sales. So going in organ from here, I'm thinking about, I have learned Symphony 8, and I'm thinking about resurrecting that. I'm also thinking about maybe looking at Roman and Gothique.
To have a complete cycle.
Yeah, I'm thinking along those lines. I'm also thinking about maybe finishing learning the first symphony of Vierne, and because I already play the second and the third.
Oh, so Vierne project would be also on the horizon.
Perhaps. You were making a mention earlier about what do we do with retirement, because I am mostly retired from ophthalmology now. I volunteer in a free clinic for people with no medical insurance, but it gives me more time. And actually, what I have been doing more of in the last several years is composition. So working on compositions both for choir, and also one of my choir directors a couple of years ago had a gorgeous tenor voice, so I've written several pieces for tenor solo, and then of course I'm also writing pieces for organ as well. And
that's right, you mentioned this Exultate Deo piece that you will be performing.
Yes, that's happening tonight.
Tonight with the San Francisco Choir. You came here together, and how can you describe your writing process? What's happening in your head when you create?
It's interesting. For different things, it works differently. I find that if I'm writing something for singing, if I look at a text, if I'm looking like at lines of poetry, if I think about them in a quiet space with no distractions, melodies will come to my head as to how I think they should go. And that's very helpful. And then you can harmonize that and decide how to, package it. Organ, I do best if I can have a storyline, because I'm a big believer, like if I'm going to the movies, I like movies that have character development, and to me that's very, very important. It shows the transforming power of God in our lives, and I think that's an underlying theme when I write music. And so if I can come up with a viable story that has character development in it, in my mind, I could come up with a piece of music that is interesting to listen to.
Do you experience sometimes this like writer's block or composer's block when you sit and look at the blank piece of paper or computer screen, I don't know how you create, and you don't know what to write?
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting. In composition, I am mostly self-taught. I never went to college to do this, and the first time I did any kind of rudimentary lessons in composition was when I was working on my master's in piano, and after I came out of that program, I was playing organ concerts at a church in Ohio that wanted hymn-based music as part of the concert, and I wasn't finding pieces that I was entirely happy with. So I wrote a piece called Folk Hymn Fantasia on Lord of the Dance, which was a favorite hymn when I was growing up. It was actually written when I was, 10, 11, around that age. And that went very well, and I was very happy. And that happened in 1993. And I wasn't able to get another piece off the ground until 1999. So yes, I know all about writer's block. And it was in 2002 that we had the disaster of 9/11 in our country, and then our country went to war, and I am very much an anti-war person, and I was very unhappy with the way the world was going towards war. And all of a sudden, I wrote a 5-movement symphony called Symphony of Peace. And that's when I realized that I really was a composer, that it wasn't just a fluke. And I started, trying to seek out how I could get some help just to learn more how to go about, composing, when I wanted to compose something. And I did several long weekends with Pamela Decker down at University of Arizona. She's a long-standing friend, and so I did a few long weekend sort of composition camp with her. And so she helped me, learn a lot about how as a composer you're a problem solver, and you can sit and it's not just the first thing that comes into your mind is the finished composition, but it's an idea, and then you can work on it, and you can come up with options, and then you can choose what is the best option. And now that I have a little bit of a methodology, that helps get through some of the trickier parts.
Pamela hopefully will be a guest on this podcast too when her schedule permits, because she's very active and really has a lot on.
Yeah, she's a brilliant person.
Yeah. So wonderful. I hope you will continue to create, to share, and I hope Robert will continue to record and to listen to, and enjoy to Angela's playing and practices too, right? It's really fun to listen to your wife play, right?
Oh, yeah.
Robert. I remember my wife Osha, we sometimes switch places and practice on the same organ. And it's a really enjoyable process to sit on the sofa next to the organ and just to listen how she plays, really. And
makes you fall in love all over again.
That's the idea, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then of course, please keep me posted on your future developments, and I have a feeling that we'll meet again.
I hope so.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for your wonderful hospitality here. It's a beautiful, beautiful organ.
Thank you. My pleasure to share it with you, and I hope your concert will go well tonight.
Thank you.
If you would like to say hello to Angela and find out more about her and her activities, please visit her website at angelacraftcross.com. That's ANGELAKRAFTCROSS.com. Also, because Angela is the founding director and president of San Francisco Peninsula Organ Academy, please visit their website at www.sfpeninsulaorganacademy.org. That's SFPENINSULAORGANACADEMY.org. If you liked this conversation, I encourage you to visit my blog Secrets of Organ Playing at organduo.lt, where you will find lots of insights, practical advice, and training for every area of organ playing. You can subscribe to this blog for free to get your daily dose of inspiration and to be the first to know when any of my future podcasts roll out. I hope to help you reach your dreams in organ playing. I'm Vidas Plinkevicius. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you online really soon.